All right, there's a book here. I've got to get this. Edward Lear, The Complete Nonsense and Other Verse. Hey, there you are. Steve, how you doing, sir? Another week.
Another week, another day, another dollar, Mark.
It is. Listen, I've just been looking at a book that's about the complete nonsense.
What, a book
And
with
for
pages?
Yeah, with pages.
Has it got pictures?
Yes.
Is it coloured?
No, it's not Mr. Pink Whistle like what you like.
Is it called The Beano, Mark?
No, it's Edward Lear. This is real proper literature. For some reason, it makes me think of the upcoming election.
Does it?
Complete nonsense. Anyway, I thought we could talk about the election. What do you think? Seeing as we're recording on the Monday, and 3 days from now they'll be having it out in the UK.
They will, won't they? July the 4th, Independence Day.
Why then?
I don't know why then. I don't know why he would have called an election at all. He didn't have to, did he?
No, he didn't.
And
Not this early, anyway.
No, so I guess I would put that down as Muppetry.
All jokes aside, I thought we could talk about it and go through what we think and perhaps give a prediction. Who do we think's going to win and by what margins and so on and so forth? I've written down a few things I'd like to talk about, but I'm assuming we'll just go with the flow. Do you want to kick off?
No, let's kick off with what you would like to talk about, Mark. Let's make it all about you.
Yeah, this is strange since it was your idea, all this, wasn't it? Here, we are British by extraction, but we've been living in New Zealand now for almost 2 decades. But keep in touch with people back in the UK and apprise ourselves of the news. So I think we can still talk about things because our folks live there and we visit. I work with a girl whose partner went back to the UK and she's going to join him in about a week's time. And he went out early so that he could do the bike ride from John O'Groats to Land's End. And he's done it, and he's now spending time with his folks in Wiltshire. And when I said to her, "Oh, are you looking forward to go and meet him?" He said, yeah, but he's not enjoying it. So what do you mean? He said, something's happened in the 3 or 4 years that he was last there. They're all miserable. That's her words. I just get the feeling that what's happened, the people have become exhausted with the politics. There seems to be this lethargy and ennui, especially if you read or you watch certain programs and listen to debates. And the election's coming up, and I think this is going to be a reaction against the previous election of 2019, which itself was a reaction against the ongoing talks then of Brexit. And this weather vane, which I've often talked about, that swings from centre to right to left, is going to do a massive shift from the right. How far it goes from there, perhaps is something we can talk about.
So a massive swing from the right to where?
Well, this is the problem because you would assume being Labour the left. But there are people, commentators, who are much more versed with me saying the old style left and right isn't necessarily what you're getting anymore. Some argue that Labour aren't as left as they used to be. They're probably more centrist. Whereas the current Conservatives are so far right to what they were, say, 20, 30 years ago, that thing's going to have to swing quite a way before it gets to the centre. I don't know. Have you got any thoughts?
I think that there's nothing to choose between the Conservatives and Labour, full stop. I think that they are all globalist politicians who are driven by nothing more than their own self-interests and ideologies, and that they don't actually have the well-being of the people of the country at the fore of their thinking. I think they have their own well-being and how they can line their own pockets at the fore of their thinking. But that's just my opinion. I do think that you're right. I do think there's going to be a swing to the left. So there'll definitely be a swing to the left from the right. But I don't think the left are going to have a stomping majority. So I think it was Boris Johnson got in, didn't he, with quite a good majority. He got a real healthy majority when he came into power, post Brexit and all of that sort of thing. And I'm not sure that the Labour Party, from what I can understand, will get that same type of majority. I do think that the Conservative Party are going to absolutely hemorrhage. I think that they've lost all support. I think Rishi Sunak, he's an illegitimate Prime Minister in so much as he wasn't voted in by the people. He stepped into a role after Liz Truss.
Didn't she do well?
Who was also an illegitimate prime minister, in so much as she wasn't voted in by the people. And the one that was voted in by the people, Boris Johnson, however much of a clown you may or may not have thought he was the person that was voted in terms of leading the Conservative Party. And I don't know that they would have got into power with the majority that they did had Johnson not been at the helm at the time. So you've had two sort of illegitimate prime ministers, and one of whom, say, what did she do, 40-odd days?
42.
And I'm 42 days. And Rishi Sunak, who I just think has been completely ineffective, and he's got no balls. Well, he may have literal balls, but no mana,
Yeah.
no gravitas, no mana, no gravitas. He just strikes me as being a little school kid. He doesn't strike me as being a statesperson. Keir Starmer's got a bit more of that about him. He wasn't he in charge of the Crown Prosecution Service, Director of the Public Prosecutions, wasn't he?
Which you'll know more about than I will. I'm assuming you have to be a certain kind of person to do well in that field.
Well, he's got to be a lawyer, which means he's got to be corrupt.
You're on form tonight, Steve.
He's got to be a lawyer, and I'd imagine he's Queen's Counsel or King's Counsel as it is now. So he would have been. Don't get me wrong. He'd have been a very clever man and very well schooled and scholarly and very capable. But he's also quite an odd case, because didn't he, in the Crown Prosecution Service, didn't he instigate some of the more draconian laws for dragging people in after protests and stuff like that, and
I have no idea.
Not giving them the rights that they should have had? And
I don't know.
Something like that. I'm not 100% sure what that was, but I thought he was involved in some more sort of draconian laws, which sort of fly in the face really of the social leaning lefties. But he's just another globalist, isn't he? There's a interview that I saw of him where he was asked what should he have, Westminster or Davos, and he said, Davos. He'd rather have Davos than Westminster.
Well, that says a lot about Westminster rather than Davos, I think.
Yeah, it does. But I guess I'm thinking of his response in terms of seats of power and who the Westminster Parliament is supposed to look after. Davos is a rich kids club that looks after everybody else, and Westminster is supposed to be the centre of the democratic house for the people of Great Britain. So I've got absolutely no time for either of them. I think you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. It's like being between a rock and a hard place, between Scylla and Charybdis.
Laura laughs. Oh, that's a different Scylla.
So there you go.
You brought up a topic that I've got here about the ability of the MPs. Now, when Parliament was dissolved for the election, those who were currently in Parliament could decide to carry on or stand down. And Theresa May, ex-Prime Minister, decided that was enough. And at her farewell speech, her words are going to be looked at years from now as people look at Eisenhower and his warning about the military-industrial complex in the States. She said, and I've got her words here, "I worry today that there are too many people in politics who think it is about them, their ambitions, their careers, and not about the people they serve." I'm going to bring up this again later on. I think I'm going to link it to a video I saw of people in the streets and what they were saying. Because the people in Parliament come from society, and they reflect the mores and the wants of their constituents. They've been voted in. So they reflect where they're coming from, which then universally, as part of a parliament, reflects the heartbeat of the nation. And if she's correct, then there is a problem. And it seems to be a problem that's become endemic in the States and possibly now in Europe, where we're attracting the wrong people to power. And she gave a clarion call. She's been in Parliament for 30 years. And whether she was a good Prime Minister or not, I don't know. But I would say that's an interesting message. And I noticed when I said it, you smiled.
Well, that's right, because I'd said the same thing really just before you made the quote, that there are people who are in politics because they're self-serving.
Yeah.
It's all about themselves. It's about their political career. What we've got is professional politicians. And perhaps we've always had professional politicians. I don't know. But it seems to me that we have more professional politicians, people who've never gone out and done a real day's work and have gone into politics because it seems to be the easy grind. And look, having worked in government over here for a good number of years, I've seen this in Wellington. You have just career politicians, career bureaucrats, and they've never done a decent day's work in their life. They've never rolled their sleeves up. They've never got stuck in anywhere. They're just bureaucrats. They're just faceless, nameless, spineless individuals.
Don't hold back, Steve.
No, I'm holding back, Mark. I am actually holding back. I think I'm being very restrained.
You are.
I
can vouch for that.
I'm aware of what's being recorded. So it's like the church, right? If somebody wants to be a pastor, a vicar, a reverend, they should be banned for life. Don't they?
Oh, that goes back to ancient Greece. That's what Plato said. Well, Socrates.
But it's true. But it's true, isn't it?
But we never learn. We have never learned that lesson.
Nothing has changed. If somebody's, and obviously there's exceptions to the rules. There are some very great politicians, and I'm sure there are. I just don't think that there have been many for many years. I've got a lot of respect for the politicians who are like grassroots politicians who haven't been Westminsterified.
That probably means I haven't been there yet.
Probably, but you know what I mean. They haven't got stuck in that there London, and they actually keep in touch with their constituents. They actually walk the walk, talk the talk. They know local people. They deal with issues. As years have gone by, I think this is why, while I've always worked for a sort of central government, I see more and more of the value of regional government. I see more of the value of local councils and local governance. Because it's much more in touch with the coalface.
Yeah. Talking about being in touch with the coalface, I've got a point here that I watched a TV. It's on YouTube and it's Sky TV, and they went to Grimsby and it was Rishi Sunak being grilled on the stage by a lady with an audience. Why Grimsby? Grimsby was one of the places that prior to Brexit was more pro-Brexit than anywhere else. I think Clacton beats it. That's where Farage is running for. And Grimsby, because of the fishing industry, all said, we want to take control and blah, 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 blah. Well, since Brexit and they got their wish, it's not gone well. And a lot of the reason that people voted for it, in fact, the number one reason was taking back control of our borders. And it's to do not so much with illegal immigrants, but legal immigrants. And I find this video fascinating. It's on YouTube. You can quite easily find it. And the woman says to Rishi, do you know how many people have legally come into the country in the 3 years prior to this being filmed about 2 weeks ago? And he didn't know. And I don't blame him. He can't know everything. And she said, well, shall I tell the audience? And of course, this is an audience that's very keen on this. So in the 3 years prior to now, 1.9 million people have legally entered into the UK. 3 years prior to Brexit, it was 836,000. It's almost a third of what it is currently right now. And when she said that, the audience went, they were in absolute shock. So what was it for? What was the thing of taking control of the borders for then, if it's actually now worsened quite considerably? And he didn't have an answer. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's been a lot of gnashing of teeth with people who may have voted for Brexit, because it hasn't actually eventuated what they wanted. And in fact, it's in most cases, seems to have made it worse. Over to you, Squire.
Yeah, I do wonder why it would have made it worse. And I think the only reason that it would have made it worse is if there were a bunch of politicians in Westminster who didn't really want Brexit because of the potential hard work it puts them under to actually now have to deliver something, and so therefore would rather have had the status quo, and so therefore haven't done anything to try and make it work. I'm really not sure how well the UK politicians have actually got behind the concept of Brexit, because most of them didn't want it. And so if they don't want it, they're not going to push for it.
So why would you be the government under Boris Johnson that said we're going to go for it, get voted in, and then make it plainly obvious that that's not going to happen?
Because if you are on the ticket, and that's your ticket, that this is what you're going to do, and you are a junior minister or even a senior minister, and your job and your position and your authority and everything else has to sit on this. You've got to jump on this bandwagon, mate. Otherwise, when we do get into power, your job is going to be reshuffled, and you're not going to be sitting in cabinet, or you're not going to be sitting so close to the seat of power.
Right.
People will do as they're told, because what these guys seem to do, men and women, that's why you have the whip, isn't it? They get whipped into line, and they have to vote in accordance with the party and the way that the party wants it. I think that there are a number of UK politicians who would have been in the Conservative Party who did not want Brexit and will have made no effort to get Brexit going. And I think that there are a lot of average people in the street who did want Brexit in the hope that it would actually bring back control of borders, bring back control of what they saw was a loss of British sovereignty to unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. Which I completely understand. Why would you want faceless, nameless people in a foreign country telling you what you can and can't do?
Yeah, but the simple economics will tell you that if you're going to put up barriers for stuff coming in, that stuff coming in is going to cost a lot more money. And you're going to have a lot more expenditure on keeping the barriers up. You'll need more border force, you'll need more customs, you'll need more police. I mean, what did they expect?
I don't know. I don't know what they expected, but it's like everything in recent years. I don't think anything has been well thought out, and I certainly don't think anything has been well executed once it has been put into play. So even if you have a crap plan, it's better to have a crap plan than no plan. And if you have a crap plan, then at least do your very best to turn that crap plan into some sort of positive outcome. And I don't think they've done that. I really don't.
Well, that may explain then, in some way, one of my next points, if you don't mind me going on to it.
No, you crack on.
I think this is an evidence of false equivalency, and I've noticed it in the States as well. So, The Guardian TV on YouTube did interviews leading up to Brexit vote in various towns. I think one was Stoke-on-Trent, one was Guildford, Grimsby. And they have revisited them. And for Stoke, they showed you the high street before Brexit, and they've showed you it now, and you think this place had suddenly become Soviet Russia on a bad Wednesday in 1975. A lot of stuff shut down. It's grim looking, and nobody seems happy. And in fact, they interviewed two guys who are in their 30s, and they said, our parents kept saying to us, on a Friday night, everyone's down the pub, down the discos, there were loads of discos. We know all about this, don't we, Steve? We grew up through the 80s and all that. We can vouch for that. That's all gone. People don't have the money. So what they did, they went and talked to people, and it was noticeable in Guildford, because the guy said Guildford in Surrey is an area that you would assume is quite affluent.
Yep.
But that's not necessarily the case now, post-Brexit. And the interviewer said what he's seeing is normally, before Brexit, the disconnection normally in deprived areas has now reached or infected Guildford. He said that contagion is now spread, and that is the problem. There is nowhere in rural Britain, outside London, that hasn't been affected, and not necessarily positively by Brexit. But then he interviewed three ladies who just happened to be walking down the street. In fact, they showed you him trying to get people to talk, and they wouldn't. But these three did. And my point being is what they said. He said, "Are you looking forward to the election?" And they didn't want to talk. Said, "Are you going to vote?" Said, no, there's no point. They can't vote for them because they're all of them bad. And the guy said, "What do you mean all of them?" He said, "Oh, they're all bad. They're all in government. They're all running the country. They're all running it to ruin." And I thought, do they really know how politics work? Do they assume that everybody is making decisions in government? I know there's oversight, and then there is the opposition that can do certain things. But they're not the ones making decisions, as what the government would be doing. And I wonder if it's because naturally, and let's be honest, Britain naturally, for the last, nearly all our life, has been right voting. They've got Conservative more often than not. So the average person baked in is centre right, probably right. And they don't want to vote for that party because they've become exhausted by them. And rather than say, I'm not going to vote for them, they're saying, oh, they're all bad. In other words, this false equivalency. I'm not saying they're going to be better. I'm not saying any of them could do a better job. But they, even before they get into power, they're saying they're no good. There's this apathy that I do understand. Because it's just generally they've had enough of politics.
Yeah, and if we were to replay what I said at the very beginning, they're all as bad as each other.
Yeah, but
and
why?
because I just, for the very reasons that I've already laid out. They are about self-serving. They are no longer about serving the people. And the people who are supposed to be served now feel that. And so they look at politicians. There is absolutely no trust in politics or politicians. And when you think about it, that is such a great shame, because there are so many great men and women across that country of Great Britain, let alone this country where we live, who could, if they stepped up, could be beacons of light, of hope, of all sorts of things across such a spectrum. But people look at the politicians and they go, I do not want to be tarred with a brush like those clowns, because they are nothing but muppets. And it doesn't matter whether they're on the left, it doesn't matter whether they're on the right. People do not trust politicians. They just don't trust them anymore. And I can understand why they wouldn't. You've got people who are politicians who are so disconnected from the real world. They are so disconnected. I mean, take Rishi Sunak, for instance. He was a hedge fund investor, right? He's worth over 600 million quid. Sir Keir Starmer, who, well, there you go, Sir Keir. He's hardly in touch with real life, is he?
Well, I don't know. I mean, at least he sees life because of the Crown Prosecution Service.
So he sees the hoi polloi, he sees the forbidden dregs of society, and he would be going, we can't allow those stupid people to have a vote. I just don't see it, matey. I think that these guys are so far out of touch with the real world and so far out of touch with the average person on the street that the average person's on the street view is these people, these politicians, and they get tarred with the same brush, exactly as I've done at the very beginning. You tar them with the same brush.
So why is it then that a man born in Farnborough to a father who was a stockbroker in the City of London is now seen as the best option and a man of the people?
Because he sits in the pub and he drinks a pint and he chats to people in a language that they understand.
Who has a German wife?
He's got the common touch. He's got the common touch.
I'm not sure about that.
No, but that's the way he's perceived. Whether or not he has or not is a different matter. People look at him and go, that's a bloke that would sit in the pub and have a beer with me. You wouldn't get the same impression, I don't think, with Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer. I don't think that's not the impression. I'm not saying you couldn't sit in the pub with them. I'm saying that's not the impression that you're left with.
You're bringing up something that I hadn't planned saying, and forgive me.
Say it then.
I am. The problem lies with the people. They're voting for people who are supposedly going to represent them. So why are so many people being voted in that are mega rich, landed gentry? Well, because look at the British system. The highest you can get is just below royalty. And to get that close to royalty, you've got to have a certain caveat around you. Normally wealth, it's got to be influence, power. Well, that's the problem. The vast majority of the people, I tell you what it is, it's a crust dissimilar to the loaf. And the loaf has been trying to get people seated at the top that will be like them, but they can't. Because with the Conservatives, they decide who's going to be chosen. And they're all old landed aristocracy. They're not going to go down some oik from Port Talbot. But the others...
But it's the same with...
Sorry.
But it's the same with Labour. Same with Labour.
It has become
Labour
that
decide.
way. Yeah, absolutely. So the problem then is, why are the parties being allowed to do this when the people should be deciding? Surely there should be a lot more outrage at saying, why can't we decide who's going to stand for us? Why is it the parties who suddenly then someone turns up knocking doors and say, oh yes, I'm representing Labour?
Because once you have gained control of something, you don't let go of that control very easily, do you? So the political parties have got control. Think about it in light of the Democrats and the Republicans over in the States.
Even worse, yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
They have got control. If you're an independent voice, you are never going to get a look in. So you look at people that are running on the independent platform, they're doing everything they can to just keep them sidelined, even off the ballot if they could, in order to just have a two-horse race. And you're going to just go, you play ping-pong between left on that side, right on that side, left, right, ping-pong, ping-pong. And there's never any real change, because the establishment... One thing the establishment never wants is a change of establishment. And so you cannot get people into certain positions who are berserkers, who are people that could be a threat to the system. And this is the problem, like him or loathe him, with Donald Trump. He was a berserker in the system, and so they could not keep him in there, and there was no way that was going to happen. And they will do everything they can to keep him out of it. There is nobody other than Nigel Farage at the moment who could be seen as a threat to the establishment. And I would suspect, that if Nigel Farage were to get into power, give him a couple of years in power, and he'd just be like the rest of them, because power corrupts.
Yeah.
And I have watched this in central government in my work. I have watched people move up the greasy pole and become bureaucrats. And if you are not one of them, if you are not drinking the same Kool-Aid, if you have got an independent voice in your head, if you've got courage of your convictions, if you're prepared to say, no, I disagree, you hit a ceiling very rapidly.
Yeah.
And you don't break through that glass ceiling at all.
Yeah.
With the politics in the UK, with the calibre of the people that are standing, it's all spins around the same pivot point of commerce, trade, money. And I don't believe, maybe very few exceptions, and those would be people that are on the periphery. Andrew Bridgen would probably be on the periphery. James Galloway, was it James Galloway?
The Scotsman, yeah.
Who's come back in. Yeah, real character, but he's a politician, right? And this is one of the things that I really like, and I think I've said this before about Tony Benn. I completely disagreed with so many of the things that Tony Benn stood for.
Rivers of Blood.
As an MP. But Tony Benn.
From the 60s?
Not Enoch Power. Not Enoch Power.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
No, not Enoch Power.
Enoch,
mate.
Sorry.
Not Enoch. No, Tony Benn.
Yeah,
Tony Benn was a Labour MP,
and
he was a pipe smoking, true to his roots, and he stood up for the values that he genuinely believed in. Offered knighthoods and all of that sort of stuff, and said, no, it goes against my socialist policies. And yet you get other Labour leaders who are socialists who take knighthoods, who take lordships, who take all of these other things, Yeah. And you think to yourself, come on, guys, if you're true to who you are, then be a man of the people, be a woman of the people. And they're not. They're not. Jacinda Ardern was a classic case in point. She's now Dame, and yet she's the one who would want to smash the honours system, and yet she's quite willing to accept it. Yeah. You can't be like that. And unfortunately, people see through it, and people see it. But what's the alternative? I honestly think that it is not left and right to start with, and it's not a line. It's not a horizontal line. It's actually a circle, and the left and right actually touch. They're just the same. They're just the same. But I do think that what we're moving into is a new era of politics anyway, and it's about authoritarian or libertarian. And people are going to be more authoritarian leaning, and that doesn't matter whether you're a traditional Labour supporter or a traditional Conservative supporter or a traditional National supporter or a Republican or a Democrat. If you're authoritarian, that's the way you'll go. If you're libertarian, you're going to probably move more to the independent side of things, I think.
Interesting thing about the word libertarian, it means something different in the States now. The far right, the authoritarian, have now taken that mantle on. And that's pretty much what's been happening in the last 20, 30 years. Words that originally meant something are now being used as a cover to make an extreme wing seem less extreme, because they'll confuse people with the title. So you look it up. American-style libertarians are not the traditional 17th, 18th century European freedom, democracy-loving libertarians. It's the exact opposite. Anyway, predictions.
Are you asking me for my predictions now?
Unless you've got something else to say.
No, I've always got something else to say, Mark.
Right, carry on then. Torch paper's lit.
So I think that Labour will get in and Sir Keir Starmer will be the next Prime Minister.
I agree.
Of Great Britain. Mm-hmm. And I think that they will have so I'm going to give you percentages as well. Give
the seats, the numbers if you can.
No, I can't give you the seats because I can't remember how they're broken up. But in terms of percentage-wise, in terms of what they're likely to get, I would go something like 33 to 35% will vote Labour. So I'll let you see if that works out anywhere in line with the seats. I would say that the Conservative Party are going to drop to something like 17 to 20% of the vote. Mm-hmm. And I reckon that the Reform Party could pip the Conservative Party as the second biggest party. And I reckon they could go anywhere between 19 and 25% of the vote.
Right.
How's that?
Okay, I think there's 650 odd seats, if I'm correct, and the MRP poll that came out put Labour down as having 406.
So what does that equal in percentages then?
Okay, let me get calculator out. 406 divided by 600. How many did I say? 650.
650. So that's well over 50% of the vote, isn't it?
62.
See, I can't see Labour getting 62% of the vote.
No, I can't. But this is the MRP poll, because what they don't factor in with that poll is reform. They're saying the Lib Dems will get 49, which is probably one of their better showings. SNP 80, Green 1, Plaid, and something. I don't remember them mentioning the Reform Party. Either way, 406 would be a major defeat for the Conservatives, because that means that the blue wall that they'd taken away in the north has just gone. And I think the problem that the Conservatives had is when they did so well in 2019, I think it made them think that there would have been a massive change in the population outlook. They may be abused of that now. But that's not to say it won't swing back in the future. These things flip like a bloody pancake. But I think Labour will win, but not by the vast majority of what people think. Because most people who keep saying, I don't know how I'm going to vote, we know they're going to vote Conservative. They won't abandon stuff they've been voting all their life. That's just not the way people work. However bad it is, or they may not vote.
Yeah.
I think the undecided is reform. How is it that the Reform Party, which is right of alt-right, has now got a foothold in the UK when they're the ones who pretty much wanted Brexit and everyone's saying Brexit's not working?
Yes. I'm just looking to see if there's any more recent stuff on. When did you last look at that?
This was about 2 days ago.
Poll tracker. How do the parties track up? So 29th of June, so this is in percentage on the BBC. 29th of June, you got Labour at 40%, Conservatives at 20%, Reform at 16%. What did I say? 33 to 35 Labour, Conservatives 17 to 20, and Reform at 19 to 25. So I seriously reckon that the Reform Party could topple the Conservatives, and I think that's going to be the biggest thing. But I do think that Labour will drop down below that 40%. I'll be surprised if they don't. I'll be very surprised. I think
they'll get a comfortable majority.
Oh no, they're going to have it. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
they'll have enough to form a government. They will be able to form their own government. They won't have to go into any coalition talks. I wouldn't have thought, but I would have suspected them to be anywhere between 33 and 35%. The Conservatives, their high, I would have thought would have been 20%, but I would see them being anywhere between 17 and 20. And Reform, I think, could go anywhere up to 25%. But that's quite a big jump over the next 3 days if they've only got them tracking at 16. So maybe they won't get as high as that, but I would have put them anywhere between 19 and 25.
Common consensus states that there's definitely a swing to the right throughout Europe. We're seeing it with the French at the moment. The first round runoff has pretty much put Le Pen's party almost dominating, although it won't bring into question Macron's power. He's not going to lose power. This is to do with the Prime Minister below and the National Assembly. We're seeing it in Europe, and we're seeing it pretty much around the world. The current Gen Z and whatever seem to be swinging naturally to the right far more. And people have asked, why is this? Well, it's because look at their life. They've had nothing but financial crisis to deal with, COVID, the mismanagement of that, wars. No wonder they've had enough with the ones in charge. And predominantly the ones in charge have been centre-left. So they've not done well for this whole generation. So this is going to be a generational shift, I think.
It'll be interesting to see what happens, mate. It'll be interesting to see how Britain goes, and it will be interesting to see whether or not the United States goes the other way, Republican-wise.
Yes, that's another thing we could probably give a thing.
You know what I'd really like to see Bobby Kennedy come in and stay as a Democrat. I know, but I'd love to have seen him stay as a Democrat, because with the abysmal showing of Joe Biden on that blooming farce of a debate between him and Trump, I mean, you're looking at both those two, and my thoughts were, over 300 million people in your country, guys, and this is the best you can do. And then I look at blooming Sakir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, and I'm thinking the same thing. 70 or 80 million people in the UK, and is this really it? There's something wrong, man. There's something wrong somewhere.
Well, they're already given the possible people who are going to take over for Biden. A couple are well known around the states. I think there's only a couple that could potentially do it. Kamala Harris is the one that's leading the pack at the moment, and then Gavin Newsom, the governor of California.
Seriously, Kamala Harris?
She's well liked, as more than you think. And of course, why would they choose a woman? Look what they're going to be running on: Roe versus Wade. But anyway, that's the US. We should be focused on the UK.
Yes, we are.
So yeah, I think it's going to be. Well, if Reform are second, that's the end of the Conservative Party. Because I would not be surprised if Farage tries to unite them, and old Conservatives won't put up with that. If it's going to be remoulded in the shape of the Farage wing, that's the end of the old Conservatives. They'll be done.
It's quite interesting. It's quite an interesting time in British politics because we've been used to the sort of two-horse race for a long time as well. You've had the Liberals chucked in there occasionally, but it's been primarily a two-horse race.
Be honest, when has it ever not been a bit of a show? For a country of 65 million, they don't off. It's a massive grand theatre.
Of course it is.
Absolutely.
But everything is grand theatre, mate. But those are my predictions, and we shall see how close I am to the mark on Friday.
Okay.
When we wake up.
Right. Well, we'll do a little quick follow-up to this one then.
Very good.
All right then. Take care,
all right,
mate.
Cobber. Take care, buddy. Bye.
Bye.